The smoke had not fully cleared when the search teams moved forward. The ground was still warm in places, and the air carried that heavy silence that comes only after hours of chaos. What had once been a small town was now broken walls, cracked roads, and scattered gear left behind in a rush. Every step felt uncertain. No one spoke much. There was nothing left to say. He walked with his unit through what used to be the main street. His ears were still ringing, even though the fighting had stopped. He could not tell if the quiet was a blessing or something worse. His hands trembled, not from fear anymore, but from the crash that comes after surviving something you were not sure you would live through. They were told to check for survivors, anyone breathing, anyone calling out. It did not matter which side. Orders were simple now. As he stepped over fallen debris near a shattered transport vehicle, he heard something faint. At first he thought it was the wind moving through twisted metal. Then he heard it again. A soft, uneven breath. He signaled the others to hold position and followed the sound alone. It came from behind a slab of concrete that had once been part of a building wall. He pushed aside loose rubble carefully, heart pounding again, sure of what he would find. When he finally saw her, he froze. Even through the dust and torn fabric of her uniform, he recognized the insignia. He had seen her face before in briefings. On screens, on printed reports, the enemy commander, the one blamed for months of pressure on their lines, the name spoken in tense rooms when plans failed, but the person lying. There did not look like the figure from those meetings. She looked human. Her weapon was out of reach. One arm lay across her side, trying to hold in the bleeding. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. Her eyes opened slowly when she sensed movement. They locked eyes. There was no anger there.
No threat.
Only pain, and something close to acceptance. In that quiet moment, surrounded by ruin, the idea of enemy felt smaller than it ever had before. He stayed there for a moment, unsure what to do. Every instinct told him to step back, to follow procedure, to call for help. But looking at her closely, he saw she was not the monster the reports made her out to be. Her face was young, tired, and full of pain, not cruelty. Her breathing was weak, each inhale shallow and strained. The blood on her uniform was dark and sticky, evidence of the wounds she had suffered. He could see the tension in her body, the small tremors that came with extreme pain. She tried to lift her head, but it sank back with a soft groan. He glanced around. The others were keeping their distance, waiting for his signal. The battlefield had quieted, but danger could still be nearby. Every second counted, yet in that silence he could not move. She was a human being like him, and her suffering was real. Slowly he crouched beside her. He checked her pulse. It was faint but still there. Her eyes followed him. They were wide, alert, but not filled with fear of him. There was only pain and exhaustion. He knew he had to do something. Calling for medics seemed the only choice. But even that felt strange. He had been told to see her as the enemy, the one whose orders cost lives. And yet here she was, dying, and he could not look away. He reached for his radio, his voice steady, despite the tension in his chest. He gave the location and described her condition, asking for immediate assistance. As he waited, he kept his hand near hers, not touching yet, but offering presence. It was the small thing he could do. She whispered something barely audible. He leaned closer. It was not a threat, not a challenge. She only said her name softly, as if it mattered to him in that moment. He nodded, acknowledging it, though words felt impossible. Time seemed stretched. Minutes passed slowly, the distant echoes of the battle still present. Finally, he heard the hum of approaching medics, their voices sharp and urgent. Relief mixed with fear. Would she survive? Could she survive? As the medics took over, he stepped back, still watching. Even as trained soldiers moved around her, tending to wounds and stabilizing her, he could not shake the image of her face. Not the enemy commander he had been taught to hate, but a human being who had made it through hell just as he had. In that instant, he began to question everything he had been told about enemies and the cost of war. She was moved to the medical tent quickly, and he followed at a safe distance. The medics worked fast, their hands skilled and precise, cleaning wounds, applying pressure, checking vitals. Around them, other soldiers whispered, eyes full of suspicion and anger. Some could not believe that he had brought in the enemy commander for treatment. Before even attending to their own, he stayed quiet, letting the medics do their work. In his mind, there was no enemy right now, only a human who needed help. Every beep of the monitors, every movement of the medics, reminded him that life was fragile and unpredictable. While she was being treated, he noticed some documents and small devices among her belongings. Medics and officers were too busy with immediate survival to look closely, but he stole glances. Some papers were marked with codes and coordinates. Others appeared to be messages, notes that suggested she had been trying to prevent unnecessary attacks. It was confusing. The person they had been trained to see as cruel and calculating seemed to have been careful to avoid. Extra bloodshed, he felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief that someone who could have been lost might survive. Guilt because he had once believed her to be completely beyond redemption. Now, seeing her human side, he could not undo the image of her face, the pain. The calm acceptance, the fleeting moments of recognition. Medics finally stabilized her enough for observation. She was still fragile, but alive. Officers debated what to do next. Some argued that she should be detained immediately. Others said she was still a soldier, and until proven guilty of intentional war crimes, she deserved medical care first. He stayed silent, not taking sides, but quietly hoping she could live long enough to explain herself. For the first time, he understood that war was more than lines drawn on a map or sides defined by colors and flags. It was made up of humans, making choices under impossible pressure. She was one of them, and in that moment he realized that the true enemy was not a single person or nation, but the blind cycle of violence that consumed so many. He kept a careful watch on her as she rested. Her eyes opened briefly, meeting his. There was no accusation, no demand, only a fragile trust, the kind that forms when two humans meet in the middle of chaos. In that silent exchange, he knew that nothing about this moment would ever leave him. It was a breaking point, not of him, but of everything he thought he knew about enemies and humanity. She woke slowly, her eyes blinking against the harsh light of the medical tent. He was there, sitting quietly on a nearby crate, watching over her. For a moment, neither spoke. The sounds of the camp outside, distant voices, movement, the occasional clatter of supplies seemed far away. Inside the tent, the world was small and fragile, held together by the hum of machines and the careful hands of medics. Finally she spoke, her voice low and raspy. "I didn't want it to come to this," she said. Her words were not directed at him personally, but they reached him all the same. He felt the weight of them, the sorrow and regret embedded in each syllable. He hesitated, unsure how to respond. He had spent months thinking of her as a symbol of the enemy, someone responsible for loss and pain. Now seeing her here, vulnerable and human, he could not find the words. You weren't like I thought," he admitted quietly. The words felt strange, even dangerous, but he could not stop himself. The reports, the briefings, "I thought I knew you. But this, you're not the same person." She gave a small, tired smile. "We all wear masks, don't we?" she said. "The world asks us to be something we are not. I had to follow orders, but I tried to choose carefully. I did what I could to protect my people and yours, when I could." They were silent for a long moment, listening to each other's breathing. For the first time, he realized that war did not erase humanity. It hid it beneath uniforms, flags, and orders. Seeing her like this, human, honest, alive, changed something inside him. She reached slowly into her pocket and handed him a small folded paper. "If I don't make it," she whispered, "this has information that could help stop more bloodshed. You need to see it through." He took it, feeling the weight not just of the paper, but of trust, responsibility, and fragile hope. "I will," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. Her eyes softened, then closed again as exhaustion overtook her. He stayed beside her, watching, thinking about the choices that had led them here. He realized that this was what it meant to be human, to see someone suffering, to choose compassion over fear or hatred, and to carry that choice forward. In that quiet moment, he understood that the strongest act in war was not pulling a trigger, but refusing to see another human being as less than themselves. And he knew he would never forget it. She did not wake again. Despite all efforts, her injuries were too severe. He felt a hollow ache as he watched the medics cover her with a simple blanket. There were no fanfares, no ceremonies, just quiet respect in the midst of chaos. It felt strange to mourn someone who had once been labeled the enemy. That the loss was real. He folded the small piece of paper she had given him and held it close. Inside were details that could change the course of the fighting, evidence that leaders on both sides might finally listen. It was fragile hope, wrapped in fragile paper, and he knew the responsibility was his now. The days that followed were tense. Passing the message to the right people required care and courage. Some refused to believe it, dismissing it as trickery. But he pressed on, knowing that if he failed, more lives would be lost. Every knock on a door, every step in a hall filled with suspicion, reminded him of the weight he carried. Slowly verification came. The information was real. Plans were adjusted, commands reconsidered. The fighting did not end instantly, but it slowed. Ceasefires were considered, negotiations began. Every small shift was a victory, even if the cost had been high. He often thought of her, not as a commander, not as an enemy, but as a person who had made choices under impossible pressure and who had trusted him with the last thing she could. That trust had changed him. It reminded him that, even in war, humans can choose to act with compassion and understanding. Months later, he visited a quiet memorial built by survivors who wanted peace rather than victory. There were no names listed on some plaques, no flags marking sides, just recognition for those who had suffered and a hope for a better future. Standing there, he felt the weight of her presence even though she was gone. Her decision to see him as a human, not an enemy, had rippled far beyond that tent. He realized that war did not just test strength and strategy. It tested humanity. And in that moment, he understood that the strongest acts were not measured in victories or kills, but in the choices to act with conscience. Even when every rule told him otherwise, he left the memorial with a quiet resolve. He would carry her lesson forward, the lesson that seeing others as human, even in the darkest times, could change the course of events. Sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is refuse to see anyone as less than human. And that choice, he knew, was powerful enough to start changing the world.